So I heard shit went down while we were away. This is America Dissected. I'm your host, Dr. Abdul and
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Katelyn Jetelina.
and we're recording this on September 9th at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. So, Caitlin, I know it feels like a million years ago considering the news, but how was your Labor Day?
Labor Day. That feels like a billion years ago. It was good. How about you?
Good. Yeah, it was nice. It was good. We did the annual Detroit Labor Day parade, and then got a little bit of time with family. I just to be stereotypical like that, I grilled some burgers on the grill,
Yes.
and we ate them in the backyard, which felt very Labor Day.
That does feel very Labor Day. I'm so glad. Are the mosquitoes insane over in Michigan?
It's not that bad because it's actually gotten like we are in peak September right now. It's like perfectly peak September for Michigan, and I'm hoping because it's sort of like settling into the 60s that we're going to have a beautiful fall colors. That's like mid-October Michigan. That's like peak Michigan.
So I didn't realize, and I was so excited to see this, and maybe I'm just like totally behind, that there is a fall foliage tracker
Yes.
online, and I am going to live vicariously through everyone from San Diego to watch these leaves change.
Because your leaves never change, nor does
Palm
your weather.
tree leaves don't change.
No, they don't. All right. So let's jump right in. We've got big news today because there is a new Make America Healthy Again report. Caitlin, are we all healthier now because of it?
Woo! Everything's going to be changed overnight. Let's go. No.
I literally set PRs this morning just because the thing came out. I was like, wow, I feel healthier already. Thank you, RFK Jr.
It's the vibe. It's the vibe. Nothing needs to change. It's just enlightenment document. No, this is
Old men on like mega doses of TRT are now are in jubilation. Serious question though, Caitlin. Clearly, RFK Jr. is on like 3x normal testosterone. You wonder why he hasn't gotten Donald Trump on it, because this feels like the kind of thing Donald Trump would do, right? Like, and he clearly is not on it. So
You think so?
you wonder like what that conversation is like. Sir, I think you should probably re-up your testosterone. No, I have enough. I will say one of the best things about being a liberal man is that you can just make fun of these like hyper pretend masculine men and just be like, no, but you like there's no there. Like you clearly aren't it. Anyway, let's jump into the report. So you got your hands on this report, Caitlin. What is your top line?
It's a nothing burger. So like moving back. So
Cooked in beef tallow?
yeah, no. Electromagnetic waves, Abdul, is in this
Oh,
report,
red light therapy.
is what is causing chronic disease among children. So like let's back up. So back in, I don't know, a couple months ago, RFK told Trump that he's going to get to the bottom of chronic disease rise among children in the United States. May, June, they kind of came out with some teasers. And this document in September was supposed to be the strategy of like, okay, these are the challenges we've been working in public health for decades and decades, and we all know very well. But these are what the policy solution should be. As a reminder, this was also leaked maybe a week or, a few weeks ago as well. So I don't know. Like I said, it's a nothing burger. It's not surprising. It's pretty consistent with what was leaked a few weeks ago. And we're going to keep our wheels spinning. I mean, that was like the bottom line to me, is that there's it's not a serious document and certainly not helpful in determining policy movement going forward.
Yeah, there were a couple of headlines that stuck out to me. One of them was this over medicalization, as if that is a central promise. And there are a lot of downstream policy challenges that can come with that. You've already seen them trying to go after things like Tylenol in pregnancy, which we'll talk about later today, or trying to go after access to antidepressants, right? And so there's a lot that can come out of that question of over medicalization that I worry a bit about. One of the other issues that they touched on that seemed to be a gigantic whiff was water quality. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, this is a really important topic for us in public health too. Is like making sure that our water and air are clean and healthy. And that depends on the systems we have in place. That is not necessarily an individual level intervention that we have to take place. Fluoride was the only thing mentioned in water quality in this report. Nothing about PFAS, arsenic, lead. And, I think that I don't, it's just not, not helpful. Like, I don't know how else to say it. It's just not going to move us in a helpful direction. And I think it's incredibly ironic, and probably purposeful they didn't include those things given what is happening over at the EPA right now. It's getting completely dismantled, and we're going to see increases in these toxins in the water. So I view this report as maybe some political interference that they didn't want to include it, because then that story doesn't necessarily make sense from the administration.
The other serious issue that's similar to water quality, where it's just a gigantic whiff, is nutrition. We've been pretty clear. I think both you and I agree that nutrition is a big challenge in the United States. And the reason that nutrition is a big challenge in the United States is because too much of our diet is composed of macronutrients that will grow a belly, and there's not enough of the micronutrients that grow a brain. And that has a lot to do with public policy decisions around what kinds of foods we subsidize. Too often, though, there are these hobby horses of the MAHA movement, things like seed oils or dyes that are fine. But then if you're missing the boat on the things that you actually could do with public policy, and you're too focused on these particular hobby horses, you're kind of missing the opportunity. And Katelyn, before we got on here, we were having a conversation about the fact that this is a nothing burger of a report. This basically summarizes most of fitness Instagram that you might have heard over the past 2 years, which is what goes through the mind of Bobby Kennedy most days. And the challenge, though, is that if this was just a report, it'd be one thing. It's that this is going to pattern decisions about where we put our dollars and our political muscle, and where information flows in ways that both detract from being able to do important things and put money and resources into less important things. And those things have a real cost when, if the foundation of public health and medical research is the goal that you want to save and extend and improve the quality of people's lives as quickly as possible, right? But this is a false pathway that we're now going to be walking down for at least the next 4 years.
Yeah, I agree. This report, I mean, I'll give them this. It did talk about nutrition. I think I counted that it was in 4 different places, but didn't say things that would actually start moving the needle. But you're right. This is going to guide funding decisions, right? Everything from what NIH may fund for research all the way to this budget bill that is going through right now for fiscal year 2026. And again, like, we just don't have time to spin our wheels and even maybe go backwards in some of these things. And that's where I just get very frustrated. It's going to be stalling for a few years, if not more.
All right, Katelyn, let's move on to another subject. One of the ridiculous claims that RFK Jr. made was that he was going to, in effect, uncover the cause of autism within a couple months. He made that claim in the spring, and lo and behold, it's been a couple months. And the much anticipated report is basically going to link autism to Tylenol and to folate. Now, folate is an important vitamin that we recommend pregnant women take, in large part because it's critical to preventing an outcome called spina bifida, or neural tube defects, which is what happens when the tube that makes up your spine and spinal cord form early on in embryogenesis. We recommend prenatal vitamins specifically for this reason. So the reason those prenatal vitamins feel like horse pills is because they contain a whole lot of folate, right? So the idea that we should be taking more folate, like, yes, clearly that's a thing that everybody recommends. Like, nobody would ever say don't take more folate. But the Tylenol question, that's been one that's been studied very extensively in the literature. Katelyn, I know that you've been thinking a bit about this. What are your thoughts on that link and where we go from here?
Right. So this was leaked that apparently Tylenol during pregnancy, according to RFK, causes autism. And when this came out, honestly, I was not surprised. This theory, or it's now a falsehood, has been simmering for years, if not decades. And it's been a ride through the science, just like it is with any other link. You know, some early studies from Yale and Harvard do suggest a possible link. However, there was this massive groundbreaking study that came out of Sweden in 2024, so last year. And it was a really important study because it was sibling controlled and it cut through straight through the noise. So when researchers in Sweden compared siblings of getting Tylenol or not during pregnancy and autism or not as the outcome, the connection between Tylenol and autism completely vanished. And this kind of natural experiment was incredibly powerful piece of this puzzle because it controls for all of these confounding factors, all of these other factors like genetics and family environment. And it shows that all of the earlier findings in previous studies that couldn't control for this were very much confounded. So I think the question is the debate settled? Not entirely. No, I think we do need more evidence. We not necessarily, you know, hang our hat on only one study, but the evidence against the Tylenol autism link is far stronger than the evidence for it, which is why, I mean, if we step back, the precautionary principle, right, telling pregnant women to avoid Tylenol just in case, just it doesn't make sense, right? For a few reasons. One, fevers themselves have been tied in some studies to autism risk. Treating those fevers with Tylenol may actually reduce that risk. And the other theme that I continue to see come out, and I'm so frustrated about it because I'm a mom, is that linking Tylenol or getting your kids vaccinated, and it's already so hard to be a mom, and linking all these risks and blaming mothers is just really incredibly frustrating. And I now it's very clear Tylenol is being dragged into the autism rumor, and reviving that myth now uh, under, I don't know, a banner from national policy. Like, this isn't just some weirdo on the side. I mean, complete national megaphone is going to do far more harm than good. What are your thoughts, Abdul?
Well, let's be clear. He is a weirdo on the side who now all of a sudden
Okay, there you go.
is in the limelight. Like, let's not pretend he wasn't always that. All right, like this is literally the man who went swimming in the creek that they told him not to go swimming in. It took his grandkids. You can't make this shit up.
No.
Anyway, the other cost of this, and I just want folks to understand, is that NSAIDs, so things like ibuprofen, they're contraindicated, in particularly in later pregnancy. And the other option, aside from Tylenol for pain relief, tends to be opioids. So there aren't very many options for pain relief in pregnancy. And the notion that you're going to drag Tylenol into this, that is a challenge because what you're basically saying is like, hey, just sit with your pain and your fever. And that's, as you noted, Caitlin, that can be a dangerous outcome as well. So there is this cost here where even if there is demonstrable evidence that this is completely unclear, you're talking about people in a moment of a lot of pain and also a lot of anxiety. And so you're using your position to disinform people and basically force them into a position of unnecessary pain and potential risk, right? Because there aren't great alternatives to addressing their pain. And I think more than that, to your point earlier, Caitlin, at some point, the process is the outcome in science. It's that you have a clear process and that you're not bought into a particular outcome either way.
Yeah.
If there was clear evidence linking Tylenol to autism and it was clear, it was demonstrable, I think you and I would be the first to be able to say, hey, like this is completely clear. The problem is that evidence is not there. And in absence of good evidence, right, there's this broader issue of just being willing to spout a statement with some degree of confidence without the evidence to prove it. And to have this, once again, from the mouth of the HHS secretary itself is just such a travesty. And there's going to be real cost on the other end of that.
Yeah, what is it called? It's policy-based evidence, not evidence-based
Yeah.
policy. I mean, starting at a conclusion and finding the evidence to back that claim up is what we're very much starting to see unfold. But this Tylenol piece of the puzzle, I think, is going to be part of a much larger report that is supposed to be coming out in September, right? A few months ago, RFK said he's going to find the cause of autism by September. I'm having a hard time because it's going to be a firestorm, like a complete firestorm of just rumors. And I don't know, Abdul, like what should we do? Like as public health professionals, how do you prepare for this full report is something that I've been trying to anticipate, and I'm not sure other than getting facts straight. Well, I'm already answering my own question. Abdul, what do you think?
I think on the one hand, we give ourselves in public health all too much responsibility to push back. I'll be honest with you. I think part of the answer is you need to be able to show the data where it is consistently. But also, I think you need to refer people to those points of trust. So,
Yeah.
when I talk about vaccines in the community, when I was a health director, I would say, hey, listen, I got to come talk to you as Dr. Abdul Sayed with 2 doctorates who spent a long time thinking about this, or I just tell you what I do as a dad, right? Because I love my little babies, you love yours. Let me tell you what I did. And that's about as much as, that's the best I could tell you is I had my kids vaccinated as soon as I could because I love them and I've seen what the consequences of these diseases are and I never want them to get sick. I think the other side of it, though, is that I think primary care doctors, folks like OBGYNs, they're going to have to step into being the front line of defense. And I think for a lot of us, the answer is, hey, there's a lot of different things you're going to hear nowadays. And some folks have evidence behind what they say and some folks don't. The best thing you can do is go talk to your doctor, right? If you have questions about this, you need to go talk to your doctor. Now, look, there are a lot of people who can't see a doctor in this country, which is foundationally a problem. But I think being able to refer people to trusted relationships and to appeal to trusted relationships is going to be fundamentally critical in a moment like this one, because people trust their doctor because their doctor takes care of them and they believe that their doctor has studied them and cares about them and will give them good advice. And I think we're going to need our medical professionals to be willing to step in and to be sharing this conversation both in the local communities that they serve, where they have a large proportion of patients who can vouch for them, and also in those one-on-one conversations with patients, because I think that's where the rubber hits the road. But you're right, like there's just going to be firestorm of mis and disinformation that's really, really hard to push back against, except for to say, here's what the facts are, here's why we believe in them, here's what we do as people who study these things, and you should go talk to your doctor and see what they think.
I totally agree with you, Abdul. I think one thing I'll add as well as like if I'm putting my communicator hat on is I'm really going to follow the lead from autism foundations like the Autism Society for America, and really because on this moment, yeah, there's going to be so much debunking and so much correction and walking people through the evidence and a lot of really good questions. At the same time, I really want us in public health to be grounded in the for and being a advocate for the autism community. And I really want to know what their talking points are going to be. I really want to know how we can help support their needs and their wants in this moment too, and kind of let that noise go on the wayside too. So I guess that's a bit how I'm thinking about it as well. Um, I'm sure they're preparing. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope they're preparing. But it's gonna be messy.
America Dissected is brought to you by Quince. Cooler temperatures are rolling in, and as always, Quince is where I'm turning for fall staples that actually last. From cashmere to denim to boots, the quality holds up and the price still blows me away. Quince has the kind of fall staples you'll wear nonstop, like super soft 100% Mongolian cashmere sweaters starting at just $60. Their denim is durable and fits right, and their real leather jackets bring that clean, classic edge without the elevated price tag. What makes Quince different? They partner directly with ethical factories and skip the middleman, so you get top-tier fabrics and craftsmanship at half the price of similar brands. My Mongolian cashmere pullover is perhaps my favorite item of clothing. If you don't have one in your lineup, trust me, you should. It's cozy and comfortable for those crisp days, and it's casual enough to pair with jeans, but refined enough for an elevated look. The quality is incredible, no pulling or pilling, and the price point for this, it can't be beat. They've become a go-to across the board, including for cookware, travel accessories, and bedding. Keep it classic and cool this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/AD for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/AD. Free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/AD.
Okay, let's pivot to the news from CDC imploding. In our last episode, the news just broke that CDC director was out. So let's update that story. Abdul, what do you say?
Yeah, so we didn't quite know the back end of that conversation about the kind of courage that Susan Monarez was showing. She was hauled up to DC where she was told she had to accept whatever future recommendations were made by RFK Jr.'s new ACIP committee, and she refused that. And then she was told she had to fire career officials, and she refused that too. She was pressured to resign. She refused that too. And so Trump ultimately stepped in and fired her. And the White House statement said that they were terminating Monarez because she, quote, is not aligned with the president's agenda of making America healthy again. This, of course, is somebody who had just been confirmed by the Senate, who RFK Jr. just weeks beforehand had praised as having impeccable scientific credentials, certainly as relative to his, which are none. There have been 4 other top health officials who've resigned from the CDC: Dr. Deborah Houri, who was the chief medical officer; Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, who served as the director of the National Center for Immunization and Respiratory Diseases; Dr. Daniel Jernigan, former director of the National Center for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases; and Dr. Jen Layden, director of the Office of Public Health Data, Surveillance, and Technology. And in the resignation letters, several of them noted that RFK Jr.'s policies made it nearly impossible for them to do their job. As one of them wrote, a quote, "I have never experienced such radical non-transparency, nor have I seen such unskilled manipulation of data to achieve a political end rather than the good of the American people." Katelyn, I know that you've got an inside view into the CDC. What's been the fallout of this moment there?
I wrote about this last week, that watching those 4 or 5 leaders from CDC walk out, because they were asked to do something illegal and that would harm the American people. And it sounds like it was they were asked to change scientific evidence for political ideologic agenda on vaccines. And instead of complying, they walked away, right? Without a parachute, without jobs lined up, without security, because protecting the public mattered more than protecting themselves. And I wrote last week, I was like, the word of the year should be courage. And I think it was incredibly courageous of them. And at its heart, it's about, I don't know, defending scientific integrity, right? And stepping up for your country. And courage is contagious. We saw that. Once they left, hundreds of CDC employees lined the streets for this thing called a clap out, right? Like this farewell and solidarity for these leaders. And we started seeing pushback and op-eds. We started seeing organizing and action on the ground. And although this was an incredibly tragic and honestly very concerning going forward, that there's no firewall really anymore between HHS and the science, it is, watching this courage gave me hope. And I think that's how we move forward, is through, together through service for truth and our country. And sometimes that service now especially is not going to be within the federal government. And that's scary, but I think our work is not done. So I just thank them for their leadership.
Yeah, it is. Takes a lot of courage to resign under circumstances like that, and it also takes a will to recognize that the public needs to understand that these are taxpayer-funded agencies. They're not Donald Trump's. They're not RFK Jr.'s. They're yours and mine. And if they're no longer places where you can do evidence-driven work to support the public, if you have to agree to a set of agendas made at the very top that are inconsistent with science from somebody who frankly mishandled the worst public health catastrophe to befall the United States in a century, then at some point, like, what is this and what does it take to be able to prove that out to people? And I think they did the right thing. The worry, of course, is, where does the CDC go from here? You're
Yeah.
talking about an agency that has had its morale gutted, its leadership hollowed out. It's now being run by Jim O'Neill, who literally his claim to fame is that he once wrote speeches for an HHS official and has since worked with Peter Thiel, a guy who famously could not answer whether or not he was committed to the future of humanity. And if that's the guy running the CDC, then you all got to be pretty damn worried about what that means. And like I shared before, I remember walking into the CDC for the first time as a newly minted health officer and seeing all the different ways all these career public servants were protecting us from things we didn't even know existed. Like, this is a national security issue. If COVID didn't teach us that like the fundamental foundational security of our country sits in the walls of the CDC and the choices that we make about how it's governed, I don't know what else will convince us. But think about this, right? 1 million people dead, like endless impacts on our economy and our way of life, millions of lives destroyed or ruined. We're still trying to rebuild from the consequences of that. Ask yourself, like, how is this not a warlike event? And, we rely on agencies like that to protect us. And when you have people who've committed their lives to public service leaving because they do not believe that it's a place where you can continue to do that work, that is a really, really dangerous omen.
Right. And like you said, Abdul, the new acting director is Jim O'Neill, who is this former biotech exec. But that's just temporary. I mean, the new director again has to go through Senate hearing. I mean, who's going to sign up, right? I mean, someone who's going to sign up is going to be a yes sir person. And I don't know. That list is starting to get pretty scary over of possibilities. So we'll see what happens.
Let's move on to the event that gripped headlines all last week. The chaos at the CDC definitely got the attention of Congress. And when the Senate returned from summer break, they hauled RFK Jr. for testimony. It was supposed to be about the upcoming budget, but it turned into something quite a bit more, considering the fact that this is RFK Jr. we're talking about in a moment when the CDC is collapsing. Here's a clip from Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado, getting to the foundational question on everybody's mind.
Secretary Kennedy, later this month, your new panel will meet to consider changing vaccine recommendations for American children. In addition to the COVID-19 vaccines, they are set to review recommendations for the hepatitis B vaccine, for measles, for mumps, for rubella and varicella vaccine, and the RSV vaccine. If your panel recommends changing the vaccine schedule for children, do you anticipate that fewer children will receive these common vaccinations, yes or no?
What I would say, Senator,
the obvious answer is yes.
Yeah, so it kind of went like that for RFK Jr. And what was astounding to me is that this is a guy with like zero decorum. I mean, he's talking to U.S. senators who are elected officials whose responsibility it is to hold him accountable, and he blatantly lied. This is an administration that could care less about Congress, clearly. RFK Jr., though, the degree of frank hostility and his willingness to bend the truth and lie, that was on full display in his hearing. And what's clear to me is that this is not somebody whose worry is about doing a good job. He's clearly posturing for something, and I think he sees himself as the heir apparent to MAGA after the current guy leaves. So, Katelyn, what did you get out of the conversation?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, so I watched the entire hearing, and a few of my colleagues and I started counting the number of falsehoods. We also had a bingo card. And just around vaccines, RFK said within a few hours of just vaccines, more than 25 falsehoods, just flat out wrong. And so I think you're right. He has no regard for scientific truth around vaccines and other things, including mifepristone. That also came up during the hearing. One thing I will tell you that was very refreshing to see, although a little too much too late, is Republicans are really starting to push back on Kennedy and very concerned with his leadership and the chaos surrounding Health and Human Services. Cassidy, a physician, very much pushed back. And in between the lines, it was really interesting that I could see Cassidy starting to put a wedge between MAGA and MAHA, which I think is very strategic and very purposeful. And he's also a physician. And so I think finally his physician hat is coming on. Basically, during the hearing, the Republicans' message to Kennedy was essentially that your promise to us 9 months ago to not make it difficult for people to access vaccines, you've broken that promise. And this was starting to really get under Kennedy's skin. He started to get very combative. You could tell he was getting flustered. And I think that if there is a strategy, the Republicans are completely right. You start separating MAGA from MAHA. And I can see that that's their playbook, at least that they're going to start exploring from here on out.
Yeah. So there's an interesting exchange between Cassidy and RFK Jr., where he almost entraps him. He's like, do you agree that the president deserves a Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed? And he said, yes. He's like, but you also think that the COVID vaccines caused more deaths than they saved. And he's like, so, you see him starting to play that game, to your point. And it's interesting because, just a couple of days later, you've got Donald Trump, who comes out and is actually quite praiseful of vaccines and of his, of course, own efforts when it comes to Operation Warp Speed.
Abdul, who did you speak to this week? Give us some hope.
Yeah, we had a great conversation with Natalie Foster. She is the president of the Economic Security Project. They focus quite a bit on guarantees, specifically guaranteed income. And we talked a lot about cash as medicine, programs like the one we helped to start to put together in Michigan that provides cash assistance to moms who are pregnant and with young children. We talked about the importance of this. And one of the reasons I find so much hope in this conversation is because there's going to be an after Trump, right? We all have to remember that it's coming. And when it comes, what are the things that we're going to want to do? And I thought this was a really important conversation about some of the things that we really can do to try and take on the challenges that too many people in our country face. So I hope folks will stick around.
That does sound hopeful, Abdul.
Yeah, we needed a bit of hope.
Great.
So, Katelyn, we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. And buckle up. Next week is ACIP. It'll be an interesting week.
We'll have a lot to talk about.
We'll have a lot to talk about. See you next week.
Yep. Talk soon. America Dissected is brought to you by the American Public Health Association. APHA is excited to welcome you to the 2025 annual meeting and expo, taking place November 2nd through 5th in Washington, D.C. APHA's annual meeting attracts thousands of public health professionals and partners from around the world and across a variety of disciplines each year. This year's theme, Making the Public's Health a National Priority. With countless sessions, networking opportunities, and unique experiences lined up, you'll leave with new tools, insights, and connections to advance your work. And don't miss the live taping of America Dissected while you're on site. Don't miss your chance to be part of the world's largest gathering of public health professionals. Secure your spot before the September 15th advance deadline before prices go up. Register at apha.org/annual meeting. Listeners of this podcast get a 10% discount using code DISSECTED25. All right. Can you introduce yourself for the tape?
Yeah. My name is Natalie Foster. I am president of Economic Security Project, and I believe that everyone in the richest nation on earth deserves an economic floor.
And can you share a little bit about what you mean by an economic floor? Especially on this podcast, we talk a lot about the juxtaposition between economic policy and health. And what are the implications on that front when you think about an economic guarantee or an economic floor?
Yeah. Well, by that I mean that there should be a floor through which no one can fall, a baseline of support people have, a guarantee of housing, of healthcare. We take on the guarantee of income, the idea that everyone should have cash that comes monthly. That supports the agency and dignity to live, life on your own terms, and that we know how to do that in this country. And if we decided it was important, we could make it happen tomorrow. So we know that cash isn't a silver bullet, right? We have broken markets. There are all kinds of structural reforms that are needed to really create the economy that works for everyone. But cash is an important tool that supports people in moments of crisis. And so that's what I mean by an economic floor and a guaranteed income.
And can you talk to us a little bit about cash as a health intervention?
Yeah, well, inspired honestly by you and a number of other physicians and healthcare providers, it became really clear to us that doctors and nurses see a number of poverty related issues in people, in their patients when they come into their clinics, but there's nothing they can do, right? They can just write a prescription for medicine. But the real prescription needed is to fight poverty. And so we wanted to dig into that connection between health and economic security. And so did a bunch of interviews with physicians, doulas, healthcare providers, nurses to understand what they are seeing and experiencing. And people spoke loud and clear that we have the solutions like direct cash. We just need to have the political will to make them happen.
And I think we saw, to your point, like I'm a former health commissioner as well, folks well know. And, you sort of think about like a car without shocks. And when it's driving along, it hits a bump, what happens? And if you don't have shocks, the car rattles, it might break an axle, or everybody's head hits the roof. Whereas when you have some shocks, right, you can weather the load a little bit more. And too often the experience of poverty is about shocks. It's about how much absorption can you take when life hits you with a bump. And I think, we don't appreciate the impact that has, not just on people's economic well-being, but when the rubber hits the road, specifically around health. And there's the health impact of not having those shock absorbers, that extra bit of money in the pocket to support you. But it's also the fact that like too often health and disease can themselves be the bump in the road. And I think these things kind of interact in some big ways. And one place where we saw that happen in a big way was the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about the pandemic era and the impact that it had on the conversation about cash and cash as a key resource for health?
Yeah. In the pandemic, it was an extraordinary economic crisis alongside a health crisis. And government decided we have to do something to support families, and reached for ideas that were lying around and had been tested and tried and true. And one of the ideas was giving people monthly cash through a guaranteed income. And it had been tried in Stockton, California, and Jackson, Mississippi, and a number of other places to great success. And so the lawmakers picked this idea up, they moved it forward in the form of the expanded child tax credit, in the form of expanding the earned income tax credit and stimulus checks. And people, for a short period of time, felt the experience of having a floor, that every month those checks came in, whether they lost their job due to the pandemic or whether they got a promotion at work, the checks came. They knew they could count on that bit of economic security. And it had a very meaningful impact on people. We know just the expanded child tax credit alone cut child poverty in half. We know that people were able to access healthier foods during that period. They went to the doctor more often. There were all kinds of health outcomes that come from having the ability to have a bit more breathing room in your financial life. So unfortunately, that has been rolled back federally. But the good news is we have a blueprint. We know how to do it. So if we can build the political will to get there, then the blueprint is there and can be turned on within weeks.
And what did we learn about the impact, right? I know there was a lot of effort to study the experience of the pandemic. What did we learn about the ways that people used that cash? And then also want to sort of get into more of the literature about what we've been learning about these experiences in cash. But what did we learn during the pandemic specifically?
We learned that people felt more agency over their own lives. So for example, I talked to a mom who every year her kid goes out for soccer, and it's very stressful for her because he's outgrown his soccer kit each year, and she has to get a new one, and that's not in the budget. And the year she got the child tax credit check, was able to go to the store and get what the kid needed to start soccer. She felt tremendous amount of relief around that financial stress, and her kid was set up for success. It was that kind of simple story that we heard over and over and over again, that sit alongside the stories of people eating 3 meals a day instead of 2 meals a day, right? Because they were able to afford to do so. And so I think it's the agency that is really important. We also know people were less stressed. We know that financial stress is the biggest stressor today in people's lives. And during the pandemic, there were many, many stressors happening. But one thing could be relieved when those checks came in the door. And so people felt a bit less stressed.
And can you talk a little bit about, there have been a couple of different studies now that have come out looking specifically around the impact of cash on health, particularly among the well-being of kids. Can you talk a little bit about what the literature is showing us specifically? I know there's some studies that have been a little bit less conclusive and or supportive, and then there are studies from abroad that have been incredibly supportive of cash as a health intervention. Can you walk us through some of that literature?
Yeah, we wanted to dig in specifically to the period of time in an early family's life. So the pregnancy, the birth of the child, and the first few years of a child's life, that is a very expensive and vulnerable, exciting moment in people's lives. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about that period of time, because the literature there is it's really profound. One thing we know is that during that period, earnings go down because the mom is not able sometimes to work as easily in the last 2 months of pregnancy and in the first few months of pregnancy. So you have a period of life that's vulnerable and then financially vulnerable, yet costs skyrocket, right? Babies are expensive, even babies where there's no difficult, pregnancy involved. They're still incredibly expensive. And so you have a real mismatch in people's lives. And so we know that cash supports families, in that moment. We know that it improves pregnancy and birth outcomes. It helps people with medical, care, nutrition, safe housing. They're able to spend the money in the way that they know best and in the way that they need. And so conditions are linked to better birth outcomes. Dr. Zaya Malawa in San Francisco is doing a study looking at cash transfers and the racial disparities in maternal health, specifically with Black moms and AAPI moms, and is finding that cash transfers have a significant impact on easing those racial disparities, right? So we know that it's important during the pregnancy. But the second thing we found is that it supports mental health in the patients, right, in the parents themselves, but also in the healthcare providers. And I'd love for you to speak to that in your own experience, the experience of having patients come in who are experiencing difficulty due to just not having the money needed to buy the diapers, to have the electricity on in their house, The things that so many people take for granted is really stressful for providers. And so we saw that it supported mental health among both patients and providers. We also saw that it allowed people to follow up on care more thoroughly. In Atlanta, for example, 43% of the mothers who were part of the cash transfer program, right, the guaranteed income program called In Her Hands in Atlanta, were able to go to the doctor on a regular basis and take on appointments that they had been putting off due to cost after they were enrolled in the program. So those are just a few of the things that we saw across studies in this country and from interviews with providers.
Yeah, I don't see patients day to day, but I know that in my experience of operating FQHCs and public health departments, that it's a lot harder to take care of folks when A, they see a lot of these bumps in the road, and B, they don't have shocks. And so much of what a doctor does every day is to offer advice and counsel and then direct folks to things like, interventions that may cost money, things like medication and or surgery. And what happens is when you've got patients who have very, very long problem lists and you cannot deal with all those problems, plus each of those problem lists both is exacerbated by foundational poverty, and folks don't necessarily have the means to be able to get the kinds of services that they need. It can be extremely frustrating, and it leads to this well-worn syndrome that we call moral injury. This idea that, if you know that something is wrong and broken and you are trying to fix it and you cannot do it, that at some point there is this reflexive response, which is almost a numbing to what you see in front of you, which I think afflicts a lot of clinicians in our healthcare system. And I think if you can address that foundational challenge that too many people have by making sure that they have the resources to get the care they need and or to prevent the outcomes that you are trying to work with them to prevent, it changes their experience. America Dissected is brought to you by Incogni. We live in a world where personal information is more accessible than ever, sometimes a little too accessible. Data brokers collect and sell your private details, your name, home address, phone number, even your browsing habits, without you ever knowing. That's why I've partnered with Incogni. It's helped me take control of my online privacy by removing my data from shady people search sites, brokers, databases, etc. It hunts down these unethical sites and gets your info removed from the places that expose your private information. Incogni automatically and continually monitors your data privacy without you ever having to lift a finger. All you need to do is grant Incogni permission to make requests on your behalf, and it'll contact all those shady sites, requesting the removal of all your personal information. Its professionals will handle any objections and keep checking back in to ensure your information stays off these sites. Given what I'm doing right now, you can imagine the online trolls trying to scour the internet for my personal information. So keeping my and my loved ones' personal information off the web, it's a must. And with Incogni, I can rest assured that I've got the best in the business watching out for me and my family. And they've just introduced something huge, custom data removals. With their new unlimited plan, you can copy and paste any link where your info shows up on sites beyond their usual list, and their privacy team will work to get it taken down. Incogni's privacy experts actually go in and handle the removal manually, even from sites that are harder to deal with. It's like having a privacy SWAT team on speed dial. Right now, you can get 60% off their annual plans by heading over to incogni.com/dissected and using the code DISSECTED at checkout. It's also completely risk-free. Incogni offers a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied with them removing your personal information off the internet. Live free from dangerous spam by using Incogni. That's incogni.com/dissected for 60% off their annual plans. If you're looking for an excellent philosophy podcast, here's a show for you. The Partially Examined Life is a philosophical podcast by four guys who are at one point set on doing philosophy for a living. For each episode, they pick a text and chat about it with some balance between insight and flippancy. You don't even have to know any philosophy or have read the text they're talking about to follow and enjoy. With a 13-year-plus catalog of episodes, The Partially Examined Life has probably covered any philosophical topic you're interested in. From practical ethics to theoretical foundations of science, they go deep into the history of philosophy while making it personal and funny. Join the over 45 million downloads already pondering with the Partially Examined Life. Find new episodes wherever you stream your podcasts or at partiallyexaminedlife.com. I want to ask because, so much of this literature, and having been a social scientist at the beginning part of my career, so much of this literature is tough because, there are multiple questions about when and how, right? Like, obviously, poverty is bad for people. The question, though, is that if you are going to use some amount of cash to address poverty, when, in what circumstances, for whom, how, all of these questions get real mired in, okay, so what are the outcomes going to be? And I think in some respects, like this literature, you can't set up a perfect experiment because life is complicated. And, in so many ways, the circumstances that people are going through change the experience of how cash is going to operate in their lives. What can you say to help us kind of understand the kind of outcome that we're trying to get to? Because I think that's actually a lot more valuable. People get, especially folks with PhDs who are way too interested in study methodology, get caught up in like the design of a study. And I think sometimes the bigger question is, okay, what problem do we think this is going to solve and how? It might be helpful to just pull us out and give us a sense of like, what is the problem we're trying to solve and how, to help us to understand what the gaps in some of the research might be and where we need to be studying it better.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is create stability for families so that they can better weather the shocks of this changing economy, right? As AI changes right underneath our feet, jobs that will exist in the future and jobs that will not, as the climate changes and wildfires and climate chaos intensifies. And as things happen in individual families' lives, children get diagnosed with cancer, parents age. Those are the kinds of shocks that can be weathered with economic security. And if that doesn't exist, it is very, very stressful for families. And it doesn't have to be that way, right? There is enough resource in the United States to create that stability for families. One of the things I was struck by is Dr. Kira Bona, who's a pediatric oncologist in Boston. And she talked about cash as a way of like medicine, right? That when a child is diagnosed with cancer or has, a high risk mutation, she said, we immediately intensify treatment because we know they're more likely to relapse. And so she is arguing that cash should be the exact same, that when we know a kid is in poverty, we know a kid is sick, or even just the birth of a child, that's a moment you want to be intensifying support to that family, like the child tax credit, right? Or like what's happening in Flint, Michigan. This is a program called RX Kids. I know you're familiar with it as well. I'd love to hear your experience. But it was really exciting. And you've had Dr. Hannah Atisha on the program too, Dr. Mona. So she's a pediatrician in Flint, and she had this experience where patients were coming through and she said, I do want to write a prescription for poverty. And I'm going to make sure every child born in this city gets a check, that every mother who gives birth to a child has a check before that birth happens, because that is a very vulnerable period of time. And for the first few years of the child's life, every month, a check is going to come in the door. And she's made it happen. And we're already starting to see the results across Flint. And that is just a model of what it could look like across the United States if we decided to write this prescription for poverty.
Well, I know Dr. Mona well. We worked together for probably about a decade now, since the Flint water crisis, and she sees RX Kids as the response, the right response to all that's happened in Flint, and that tells you a lot about how potentially transformational this is. And so much so that when I led Wayne County's Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services, we wanted to expand it into Wayne County, and that is on its path now. I'll tell you the impact. I think you see it in the experiences of folks, and as you mentioned, we get caught up in the what are we measuring and how, and so much of what you see in people who have received this, they recognize the impact in their lives in some pretty profound ways. We're obviously, as you talked about, we are talking about this in a very unstable environment. You think about the cutting of SNAP benefits for low-income people. You think about the gutting of Medicaid and the impacts those are going to have. How do you think of programs like this operating? Because I think the end outcome, of course, is we want to have this as policy. But right now, a lot of these programs have been funded through a combination of different types of investments. Some of them philanthropic, some of them sort of a new use of government programs. In this era, what do you think are the biggest challenges to getting UBI passed, and what can we do to drive the conversation in the right direction?
So we're in a hard moment for any sort of economic stability for families. It feels like it's actually manufactured instability that is happening as we speak today. And so in some ways, we know exactly what not to do today. But the good news is a fewfold. One is we have a blueprint for how we would create the stability for families. We just have to do it. And as the federal government has created more and more instability for families by passing the most recent bill that, as you said, makes significant cuts and may in fact kick 10 to 20 million people off of health insurance altogether over the next few months. During that period, at the state level, we have seen a move toward more stability in some states. So we've seen states pass expanded child tax credits, red states, purple states, and blue states. We have seen mayors and nonprofit leaders and civic leaders launch guaranteed income demonstrations, not because they think that we can demonstrate our way to a new social safety net, but because they are showing the star, the North Star of where we can go if we decide as a nation to invest. So while the headwinds federally are honestly terrifying, I think there's a lot that's happening at the state and local level that can show us the way if we can get through this period.
What gives you hope right now? You wrote an incredible book about guarantees generally, not just guaranteed income, but guaranteed healthcare. What gives you hope right now as we're watching ourselves slide into this almost nadir of public policy? What is giving you hope, and what is inspiring you to continue to drive this work?
You're going to have to answer the same question, my friend, because I want to hear that as well. There's a phrase that has really stuck with me that Mariama Kaba said, that hope is a discipline. And I think these days more than ever, it's felt like it has to be a discipline. And you really have to look for where people are in motion, where people are fighting back, where people are building a better world, a different world. So that is, what I'm trying to do. One thing that's giving me hope is just honestly reading through this report with the different doctors and pediatricians and nurses and doulas talking about what cash meant in people's lives. It's very exciting that we have moved from an era where it was speculative. This is what we think giving people will do, to an era where it is happening, right? All over the country, these demonstrations are happening. We're up to 160. And so we now are in a world where you have healthcare providers who are able to see what it looks like in people's lives and speak to that, who see a patient who, because she was offered childcare through her postnatal program, was able to come into the doctor to get her post eclampsia health care done, which saved her life. A simple thing like having access to childcare, having access to the resources needed to support one's family life. Like, those are inspiring stories. And it's the world I think, it's the world I want to build. How about you?
As a hazard of what I spend my days doing every day, I get to meet folks in their living rooms and community halls, and you realize that the laws of gravity still apply. I think if you transact with public policy and politics via a screen on the phone or via a tablet or a computer, the world looks a lot more bleak than when you spend time looking people in their eyes. And I think what that means is that there's an opportunity to translate the goodness that you see in people and the basic things that we all want and need every day into a politics and into a government where we can deliver it. And I worry a lot about how this current moment might be foreclosing on that possibility, but I'm just consistently inspired by the people who I get to meet every day, who believe that better is possible and are willing to invest in it. So I really encourage folks who feel like all is lost to go spend time with other people. They say, touch grass. Don't touch grass. Go proverbially touch other people, like in their communities, like engage with them. Allow your eyes to touch each other. And I think when you do, you start to realize that the world is a far more complicated place, and that the narratives that you are bombarded with every day are built specifically to create the kind of anxiety that keep you watching. And I think when you break out of those things become a lot clearer, and it's hard not to be hopeful when you're consistently engaged with folks who want better. So I think this work, right, that you all are doing, trying to deliver on that promise of what could be better, trying to invest in our future, trying to invest in people who deserve investment, I think that is an act of hope. It's one of many happening all over the country. And I think the more often we remind ourselves that people are good and want good things, even if some people are profoundly bad and want bad things, that I think we can lean toward and move toward what's good. So I'm really grateful for that in my day to day, and I wish more people could have that set of experiences and would put themselves in positions to have that set of experiences.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I saw Rebecca Solnit recently said, if you feel like no one's doing anything, if you think to yourself, where's the outrage? You need to go to the places where people are doing things, because they are doing things. They are resisting. They are building mutual connection and support in order to withstand this authoritarianism. And they're doing it in neighborhoods across the country. So find your people, build connection, get off of the interwebs, and it does it. It's the only path forward, because there are bright spots all over this country. People who are being profoundly brave right now, both in building the next world and taking care of what's happening right in front of us.
Well, we really appreciate you being one of those people. Our guest today is Natalie Foster. She's the president and co-founder of the Economic Security Project. Natalie, thank you so much for your leadership, your time, and your insights today. Really, really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for today. You can find more content on our website, incisionmedia.co. Check out our shop at store.americadissected.com for our new America Dissected merch, including our logo shirts, hoodies, and mugs. And don't miss out on our Vaccines Work, Science Matters t-shirts. If you have guest recommendations for the show, send us an email at info@incisionmedia.co. You can follow or subscribe to America Dissected on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube at America Dissected. And you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Abdul Al Sayed, no dash. And make sure to subscribe to Katelyn's incredible newsletter, Your Local Epidemiologist, which breaks down the latest scientific evidence for over 300,000 followers. You can search for Your Local Epidemiologist on Substack. Links to all our sponsors are available right here in the show notes. I really do hope you'll check them out and show them some love. They make the show possible every single week. Finally, on your way out, don't forget to leave us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, drop us a like or a comment. Word of mouth still goes a long way too, so if you know someone who might like to keep up with everything that's happening in the world of health, please do let them know. America Dissected is a product of Incision Media. Our co-host is Dr. Katelyn Jetelina. Our producer is Andy Gardner-Bernstein. Video and audio editing by Nadine Melkonian. Our theme song is by Taka Suzawa and Alex Uguiera. Sales and marketing by Joel Fowler and Nick Freeman at Big Little Media. Our executive producers are Tara Knight and me, Dr. Abdul Al Sayed, your host. Thanks for listening. This show is for general information and entertainment purposes only. It's not intended to provide specific healthcare or medical advice and should not be construed as providing healthcare or medical advice. Please consult your own physician with any questions related to your own health.